Wow. Hey, yo, pura vida, mi gente. Yeah. What's up? Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for tuning in once again. I appreciate you guys being here. We are going to go ahead and continue our investigation on the ancient giants of America, all right? Catch up on all the previous videos we have on giants here in ancient America, everything they hid from us, all right? Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, make sure to share it. Let's go ahead and get into the video. Thanks for being here. Shout out to the live chat, everything, all right? Pura vida, mi gente. Let's go. All right, we're going to get into this book again so we can get through it. We've been going over it and reviewing this book a lot. We've been pulling out the babies. We touched some of the hijack, but it has a lot of good drop. All right, this book again is, it says here, Discovering Ancient America. Ancient America's Lost Giants. And this is from Shaviant Hayes, or Shaviant Hayes. Shout out to the author. If you like the book, make sure to buy it. Check it out. We've been doing a review for educational purposes. All right, critique, commentary, fair use. So continuing where we left off, we're going to go into chapter 7 of this book, and it's called Giants of Mexico. In ancient Mexico, giant beings played a key part in the history of folklore. Their presence is confirmed into sacred religious and historical texts that survive from the 16th century. These rare texts constructed the ancient history of Mexico, as told by the indigenous Indians before their eventual extinction. All right, that's the hijack. A lot of you are still here. It is a history that claims giants once lived in Mesoamerica and even helped build the pyramids there. The Codex Rios Vatican A Codex, an Italian translation of ancient Mexican history written during the Spanish conquest by a Dominican friar working in Oaxaca and Puebla, details a lengthy story of Aztec warriors fighting against giant beings. Aztec, or the original Mexica. So them fighting giants, they got stories about this in the codices, right? In their ancient stories. According to that Aztec or Mexica mythology, some of the Kinametzin, the old ones, giants managed to survive the great floods and regroup to build or rebuild the ancient city of Teotihuacan and the Great Pyramid of Cholula. All right, remember the story behind the Great Pyramid of Cholula, a replica of the Tower of Babel, the actual Tower of Belus, of the ancient world, is the Pyramid of Cholula. That's the real one. Remember my video on that, guys. It says Teotihuacan, Teoti, Deyeoti, Toth, Teoti, Deyeoti, Wakan, sacred, great spirit, supernatural, most high. Teotihuacan was known as the place where men became gods, and it is spread out so that its pyramids and mounds correlate a map of the solar system. Besides being built by giants, Teotihuacan is associated with other strange anomalies, such as the presence of large quantities of mica. Mica is a mineral that is only found 3,000 miles away in Brazil, but yet somehow managed to make its way to almost every building at Teotihuacan. The ancient Indian, Egyptian, Roman, Chinese, and Greek civilizations, all right, so-called, right? So-called, right? We know we've broken these nations, so-called nations down, right? It's very complex. It's not one thing. And a lot of it was here in ancient America. So they were also, all these ancient people, they're saying, were also fans of mica, which contains superior electrical properties as an insulator and a dielectric. All right, you guys hear that? Maybe this added mica electrical element was used in conjunction with the hundreds of mysterious pyrite-covered orbs archaeologists found buried deep beneath the temple of the feathered serpent. The plum serpent, the Dracan. So far, mainstream academia has absolutely no idea what these little yellow balls could have been possibly used for, all right? So think about that. They find things in these temples and they have no clue what it is. They think it's just some emerald, crystal on the wall when it could be some ancient technology. Just like in the sci-fi movies, right? The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is the largest pyramid in the Americas and second biggest in the entire world. All right. Well, we got a bunch of big ones here. The Maya, Zapotec, and Aztecs all claimed that giants built the pyramids found at Teotihuacan. Giant American Indians that were not part of the other native Mexican tribes still inhabited the lands of Mesoamerica when the conquistadors first arrived in the 16th century, which correlates with the Spanish records that talk about giants everywhere they went in the Western Hemisphere, all right? They wrote about it. Some of these so-called Spaniards, right? Some of these Sephardic Jews, crypto Jews, right? According to legends and illustrations contained in the Codex Rios, Codex Vaticano A, giants were still living amongst the Aztecs or Mexica, although they lived hidden in the jungles and mostly stayed out of the way of the Mexica Aztecs. That was until the conquistadors showed up and put everybody's lives in jeopardy. Now, as the conquistadors attempted to overthrow the Aztec stronghold of Teotihuacan, one of the giant warriors known as Tezcatlipoca, chief, Katzin, literally in Hebrew means chief, Katzin. Tezcatlipoca helped fight the Spanish by throwing huge stones down on the. All right, and here's an image of Teotihuacan. All right, a bad image, right? So they throw stones on the befuddled conquistadors, hitting them with stones. Despite being defeated that day, the violent Spaniards eventually gained entrance to Teotihuacan and promptly murdered and enslaved, okay? Murdered and enslaved the remaining Aztecs or Mexica people. Enslaved, right? Enslaved, right? Did they transport them to Virginia colonies? Did they transport them to South America? Did they transport them to Jamaica? Did they transport them to Hispaniola, Barbados, South Carolina? Quite possibly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So here, letting you know again, Indians being enslaved, not Africans. Including their giant warrior, Tezcatlipoca, the giant warrior, an American Indian who was most likely related to the Kinametzin giants, who according to the ancient Mesoamericans built Teotihuacan. A son of a Spanish priest, Fray Diego Duran. All right, so now they're going to talk about Diego Duran, which we have read his primary sources from the 1500s saying how the Indians of the lost tribes were the Hebrews, the ancient Israelites. His whole book is literally about that. And we're going to get more into Diego Duran's book. We got 2 videos on it already, but we read a couple chapters of it. This is a book written in the 1500s, and they're talking about his comparisons to the Indians and the ancient people of the old world and the biblical people. So let's see what it says here. It says, Fray Diego Duran grew up in central Mexico and was familiar with the remaining giant Indians that stood on the edge of extinction there. Duran was given a unique first-hand opportunity to learn about the Aztecs and the early indigenous history of Mexico. He became a recognized expert on the language, customs, and pre-Columbian history of Mesoamerica, and for that reason, scholars regard Duran's written works as extremely important. So that's the one I'm talking about that we have read. It's very important. First-hand account, and he's letting them know these are the ancient Israelites, literally. After spending 33 years among the natives in Mexico, Duran returned to Spain, where he wrote a 78-chapter book detailing the history of Mexico, from its mysterious origins up until the conquest of the Spanish. When gathering information, Duran conferred with American Indians who knew how to interpret native hieroglyphics into picture writing, manuscripts, helping Duran understand the native stories and how they related to the accompanying pictographs of hybrid animals and men clothed in feathered serpent attire. Okay, so basically, he actually grew up there a lot. He grew up amongst the Indians. He learned their language, Fray Diego Duran. He got to talk to a lot of the elders. He was one of the interpreters in between guys. So he actually wrote a lot of the stuff that they told him to write in his book, guys. That's what I'm saying. That's why he would give opinions to it, but he was telling you, this is what they told me. This is what the other thing they told me. So he's also breaking down a lot of other stuff and why they wear certain things and everything, like they're saying here. Continuing, it says, with the help of American Indians, Duran was able to successfully record the ancient history of Mexico. A history that, according to his writings, wasn't shy about the fact that giants once held a formidable presence there. According to Aztec history, as recorded by Duran, the lands of central Mexico were ruled completely by a race of giants until local tribes combined forces to run them out of the area. Duran writes that once the tribes had won a few victories and began to settle. All right, and we're going to get the account right here. We haven't even probably got to, I think we did get to the story of Cholula on his book. It says here, so when they began to settle, right, these tribes, once they began to settle, right, from their exodus, literally, those from the first region were Chichimecs, and the people from Puebla and Cholula were the giants. The Kinami, or Kiname, which means men of great stature. The other people who were found in Tlaxcala and Cholula and Huexotzinco are said to have been giants. These were enraged at the coming of the invaders and tried to defend their land of the battles that the Cholultecs fought with the giants until they killed them or drove them from the country. These giants lived no less bestially than the Chichimecs, as they had abominable customs and ate raw meat from the hunt. In certain places of that region, enormous bones of the giants have been found, which I myself have seen dug up at the foot of cliffs many times. Duran's writings offer a valuable glimpse into Aztec history, mythology, and culture, and are among the oldest known Mesoamerican historical texts. The history of Mexico is fascinating and full of fireballs from the heavens, flayed magical serpents, and of course larger-than-life characters like ancient giants, right? We're just talking about giants and dragons, magical serpents. These giants seem to be everywhere in the history and mythological record of the ancients. Did the smaller Native Americans walk across the land bridge from Asia? That's the hijack. While the coastal seafaring giants came over from the South Pacific regions? This is their asking questions and conjecturing, right? Were the Denisovans once related to the ancient giants? Interesting there. That we can follow up on, right? Did they leave their Neanderthal kin and make their way to the South Pacific, where they eventually sailed into Mexico and up near the Caribbean? This is them conjecturing, bro. Does this explain why some tribes of the Solomon Islands have red hair and a natural affection for cannibalism? Oh man, that's the hijack, you see? If these giant Denisovans entered the Americas while landing in Peru and other shorelines of Mexico, it would be long before their ancient lineage was introduced into the Americas, especially along the coastal areas where their offspring left behind coastal tribes of giants. When the Karankawa, the Karankawa, who were the Indians that were actually freed on June 19th in Texas, guys. The Karankawa were the people who were in that mission. The Karankawa, mostly Indians, right? The Karankawa were an ancient Carib tribe that had settled there, related to a lot of the Carib nations. When the Karankawa, says here, traded copper and shells with the red-headed giants of the north, they were likely trading with their own distant relatives. As the Americas was the last settling place of the giants, These were the same giants that, according to the Aztecs, built the round pyramid of Cuicuilco. We got a whole video on the pyramid of Cuicuilco, guys. It's a really good video because it proves that this place was like over 8,000, 9,000 years old. It's like under lava, under an eruption that happened over 8,000 years ago. So it proves that it's really ancient. You know, that's giving it a minimum date, right? Before the eruption. The pyramid of Cuicuilco, they're saying here, which mainstream history claims as the oldest in the Americas. Discounting that it was built by giants, of course. The oldest, this is what I'm saying, is really old, guys. But when the Spanish physician Hernandez entered the odd-shaped pyramid in 1531, he wrote about having found the bones of eerie prehistoric beasts, toxodons and titanotheres, lying next to the bones of men at least 17 feet tall. All right. I don't think we got that story when we did the pyramid of Cuicuilco video. I can't remember. I might have mentioned it. But you guys see how old this is, right? Just like they're finding kind of similar things in the U.S. We got these animal bones that are supposed to be extinct a long time ago next to human bones, modern human, and it happens to be these are like 8-footers, 9-footers, very tall. Now 17 feet tall, guys. Now that is giant. That is giant. That is something we can't even imagine, seeing a person 17 feet tall. All the proportions the same, you know, next to these animals that are supposed to be extinct long ago. That's how old this pyramid in Cuicuilco is, guys. It's even older than what they're telling us. Now we're trying to prove just minimum, 8,000 minimum based on the eruption of the volcano and all that. There's another pyramid in ancient Mexico that shares the same architectural style with the pyramids of Teotihuacan and is located about an hour away, is the pyramid of Cholula. Now, guys, if I say I have videos on this, make sure to go back, look through my videos, or just go and search and put Cholula, Pyramid of Cholula, Kurimeo, or put Pyramid of Cuicuilco Pyramid, Kurimeos. See if it pops up. But I definitely have playlists, guys, and you can go over my older videos. You guys are going to see all we've researched and the amazing stuff we have found with these things they're mentioning kind of here. So it says here that it's the Pyramid of Cholula where they're going right now. It says it's no surprise that this pyramid, just like the complex at Teotihuacan, was also built by the Quinametzin giants. When the conquistador Cortez and his men laid eyes on the massive 50-acre structure nearly 4 centuries ago, they were stunned at the architecture, as it was far superior to what they had known back in Spain. Again, far superior. Far superior. So what you mean they're finding savage people here? They're finding highly civilized people here. If it's far superior to what they knew back in Spain, right? So-called Moorish architecture. This is far superior. The 16th century Spanish Jesuit missionary Joseph de Acosta shares his personal story of giants in Mexico in the History of the Indies, Volume 2, all right? That's a good one right there. We're going to have to get into Joseph Acosta. We've read some of his primary source accounts. Again, another person that was there in the 1500s, writing first-hand accounts of what they were seeing and what they thought, right? We also got to dodge the hijack because they added their personal opinion to it, right? Based on their views of the world in that time. But we have read them. And so they're saying he also mentioned the giants, right, in Volume 2. It says, when I was in Mexico in the year of our Lord, 1586, so 1586, right, they found one of those giants buried in one of our farms, which we call Jesus del Monte, of whom they brought a tooth to be seen, which, without augmenting, was as big as the fist of a man. You guys hear that? One tooth was the size of a man's fist. One tooth. A human tooth they found that big, guys. Picture that. Look at your fist. That's how big the tooth was. Put that next to your mouth. You see how big that tooth was. See how big this person was. And according to this, all the rest was proportional, which I saw and admired at his deformed greatness. Wow, they saw the whole body. This is according to Jose Acosta in the 1500s. Fernando de Alba Itztilxochitl, a native-born Aztec prince and scholar of Mexico in the 1600s, compiled another history of Mesoamerica that proclaimed there were giants in Mexico known as the Quinametzin or Quinametzin, who were eventually defeated by the Olmecs and whose bones could be found all over the country. Defeated by the Olmecs, huh? The Spanish historian Juan de Torquemada wrote another chronicle of ancient Mexico. All right, Torquemada is another source we've gone over. Again, when it comes to the Hebrew and all the research we've done, all these, they all see they quote a lot of things that are very important. These are people who actually were with the Indians in that time. You know, even though they add their hijack and they might be gatekeeping a little bit, they do drop some knowledge here and there that we can pull out, you know, and we can create our, you know, conclusions based on our research, right? So Torquemada, he wrote another chronicle of ancient Mexico, which says that when the Toltecs came to Teotihuacan, it was inhabited by monstrous giants with long, thin arms. Wow, wow. Certain Nahuatl codices even name and depict these giant kings as great builders with godlike abilities. Hubert Howie Bancroft, again, another author, we've read his books too a lot. Guys, we got a lot of research behind us, man. We got all these scholars right here that don't get mentioned in our modern day curriculums, only briefly. So he wrote extensively about the history of the Americas in the late 1800s. And his epic work on Mayan mythology, the Popol Vuh, has become a landmark text of ancient Mesoamerican history. In this highly respected work, Bancroft double checks all of his historical citations, especially Ixtlilxochitls, and confirms the early native beliefs that giants once ruled Mexico. He says the Quinamis or giants are mentioned as the first inhabitants of Mexico. Okay, guys, you got that clear? In their ancient traditions, even the Olmec, all these people that went there in their legends, they said there was giants living there when they got there. Our knowledge of Olmec history subsequent to their first appearance is confined to a few events which occurred in Puebla. All right, so the Olmec in Puebla. So now look, the colossal head, right? The Olmec. What if they were depicting the giants, huh? Here, chiefly on the Rio Atoyaye near Puebla de los Angeles and Cholula, they found the Quinamis or giants. These Quinamis, as Ixtlilxochitl states, were survivors of the Great Destruction, which closed the second age of the world, huh? Survivors of the flood, huh? Just like the story of Tubal-Cain and his son, somebody surviving in the, you know, on a mountain or on the boat, Noah's boat on the. So they survived. It says the Quinamis, traditionally assigned as the first inhabitants of nearly every part of the country, have been the subject of much discussion among the Spanish writers. Clavijero considers the existence of a race of giants doubtful, although admitting that there were doubtless individuals of great size among them. Villa Señor y Sanchez, one of the early Spanish writers, names Tula as one of the many localities where giant bones had been found. Humboldt mentions some giants' bones that were found within the limits of the state of Michoacan. Right? Remember Alexander D. Humboldt from the 1700s, another author we read from. Right, a lot of great job. We got to get back into his book. A lot of great job. He found giant bones in Michoacan in the 1700s. Rivas, in his standard and very rare work on the triumphs of the faith, says, at San Agustin, between the city of Durango and San Juan del Rio, Arlegui notes the existence of bones of giants. All right. Bernal Diaz del Castillo. I mean, all these authors, guys, we've read all from them. A soldier during the Cortes conquest of the Aztecs became friendly with the Tlaxcaltecs, who told him that a race of giants had once inhabited their land. Castillo later wrote a captivating book called The Conquest of New Spain from the Cortes expedition to Mexico around 1520, which stirred imaginations for centuries. In it, Castillo shares his story about that enigmatic race of Mesoamerican giants. All right. Again, we've read his book, but let's see if we read I don't know if we read this part, but you see how much drop there is on giants in these old books from the 15, 1600s. Castillo says they said their ancestors had told them that very tall men and women with huge bones had once dwelt among them, but because they were very bad people and with wicked customs, they had fought against them and killed them. And those of them who remained had died off. And to show us how big these giants had been, they brought us the leg bone of one, which was very thick, and the height of an ordinary sized man, and that was a leg bone from the hip to the knee. A leg bone from the hip to the knee. I measured myself against it, and it was as tall as I am. Wow. Though I am of a reasonable height. So wait, the bone is as tall as he is. Wow. A leg bone from the hip to the knee is as tall as actually his height. Just that part of the bone. Just that part of the body. Wow. So the bone is as tall as he is, though I am of a reasonable height. They brought other pieces of bone of the same kind, but they were all rotten and eaten away by the soil. We were all astonished by the sight of these bones and felt certain there must have been giants in that land, all right? This is the biblical lands, all right? Yo, you guys understand? All right, we got a reference earlier with the fist, the tooth, but now, come on now. A bone from the hip to the knee. That's so. Look at your hip and look at your knee. That bone that goes from that, right? That one bone is as tall as this guy. That's how big that giant was. That was big, guys. These are big people. Acclaimed historian Bernardino de Sahagún. All right. Again, another author we've quoted and gotten a lot of drop from these people. I'm telling you, and they dropped it even though they didn't want to. They were writing to themselves, because they were conquering too. They were letting us know who these people were, these biblical people. Sahagún was definitely one of them saying that. So he arrived in the Americas in 1523 and later wrote a 12-volume tome on pre-conquest Aztec history, backing up the claims that Kinametsin were ancient giants that built both the Teotihuacan and Cholula pyramid complexes. Sahagún also chronicled the strange paranormal activity associated with the pyramids, as 10 years prior to the conquest, a great triangular ball of flame hovered in the skies for 1 year straight, causing much concern among the tribes. Wow, you guys hear that? What is that? What are they talking about? A fireball, huh? More weird things followed, including fires of unknown origins and raids from the skies that leveled some of their temples and pyramids. These events were seen as omens and that a great change was coming, and it did, with the arrival of comets in the heavens flying in trees that left behind strange heavy sounds and waves of vibrations in their wake. This period of extreme Aztec uncertainty produced more outlandish niceties. Sahagún writes of a monstrous winged bird brought before a disturbed Moctezuma. A monstrous winged bird, huh? This bird even had a magical mirror on its head that dazzled Moctezuma's astrologers with visions of Martian armed soldiers riding strange beasts. Wow. Griffins, huh? Yeah, this sounds like a griffins to me, right? Was this mirror some sort of television monitor? And were these beasts actually horses? Huh. It says winged, though. You talking about unicorns? What are you talking about? After all, horses were actually strange beasts that American Indians had never seen. That's the hijack. Horses originated in the Americas, so that's a lie. And there was horses here when the Europeans arrived still, guys. We got the drop on that. We got videos on this, check it out. Whatever this mysterious bird was, so even though, this is what I'm saying, it was a bird, so what are you talking about a horse? It vanished before Moctezuma's eyes, signaling that the world as they knew it would soon be coming to an end. It would be long before old empires fell and new kingdoms were built, and with it so goes the histories of the fallen, rewritten to the befitting of future historians, right? Because the conquerors write the whole history, right? Write the story. And although both the ancient Aztecs and the conquistadors spoke of a race long forgotten giants that still remain in dwindling numbers, the history books have succeeded in editing out this bit of fascinating history, all right? They didn't tell us about this. Hundreds of years after the Spanish had settled Mexico, farmers, engineers, and workers were once again digging up and discovering giant bones while either plowing their fields or digging construction on new buildings. In 1909, builders near Mexico City, the original stomping grounds of the Kinametsin giants, found a 15-foot tall skeleton. All right, a 15-foot tall skeleton, as reported in the February 3rd, 1909 edition of the New York Tribune. Listen to this, all right? These are like these old newspaper accounts that we be always reading, right? Same thing. It says here, find prehistoric giant skeleton 15 feet high unearthed in Mexico, all right? Again, from the New York Tribune from February 3rd, 1909. You can verify that. And it says, news was received here Monday from Mexico that at Ixtapalapa, a town 10 miles southeast of Mexico City, there had been discovered what was believed to be the skeleton of a prehistoric giant of extraordinary size. A peon, while excavating for the foundation of a house on the estate of Agustin Juarez, found the skeleton of a human being that is estimated to have been about 15 feet high. 15 foot high, guys, and who must have lived ages ago. Judging from the ossified state of the bones, it's almost literally fossilized. Romulo Luna, judge of the district, has taken possession of the skeleton, which is complete with the exception of the skull. Judge Luna says that as soon as the search for the skull is finished, the skeleton will be forwarded to the National Museum of Mexico. What happened to the skeleton, guys? Which has an almost priceless collection of Aztec antiquities. The National Museum, it is said, has made arrangements to investigate this find. The discovery of the skeleton has revived the old Aztec legend that in a prehistoric age, a race of giants lived in the valley of Anahuac. All right, that's the ancient name of central Mexico. Anahuac. Anahuacan. Anunnaki? Anunnaki? Anahuac. All right, so look, now this newspaper report from 1903, or 1909, sorry, it's saying the same thing about the legends of what the Aztecs were telling the Spanish. Look how it's... So a name given by the Aboriginal Mexicans to that part of the Mexican plateau nearly corresponding to the modern valley of Mexico City, all right, Anahuac. These giants, known as Quinatsins, the story goes, were afterwards destroyed by the Olmecas, also of great stature. The Olmecs were pretty tall too, who in turn perished by earthquake. That's the hijack. You still here? Interpreted as an expression of the wrath of God. Wow, they wrote that in that newspaper. Wow. It says near the Arizona border, the lands of Sonora, Mexico, provide plenty of ancient giant mysteries from history to chew on. In 1930, the New York Times report, all right, the New York Times, Sonora, the Arizona border now, it says here. Lands of Sonora, Mexico, and Arizona. Tucson, Arizona, December 1st. Associated Press. Discovery of apparent remains of a race of giants has been made at Sayopa, Sonora, a mining town 300 miles south of the Mexican border. 300 miles south of the Mexican border, right? J.E. Cocker, a mining engineer, reports that laborers clearing ranch land near the Yaqui River dug out into an old cemetery where bodies of men, averaging 8 feet in height, were buried tier on tier. The heads of the skeletons, Cocker said, were especially large. Carved native stone bracelets were found on the bones. Beside the bodies, the crudest kind of stone weapons and implements were buried. After the first skeleton was unearthed, owners of the ranch redoubled efforts to excavate in the cemetery. Wow, isn't that interesting? So matching kind of the heights of a lot of the mound builders, right? The bones they found, 8-footers, 7-footers, 9-footers. Very interesting. You see all over the place in North America, guys. Even in Central America, South America, right? It says no follow-ups exist for either of the previous stories. But it would be curious to learn what happened to the giant 15-foot tall bones that we assume ended up in the National Museum of Mexico. Exactly. What happened? Once again, the verifiable mind-blowing physical evidence, such as the ancient giant robes and blonde-haired skulls, Now they're trying to make them white, right? Blonde hair skulls discovered by the explorer Paxton Hayes in northern Mexico's Copper Canyon eludes us. I want to see the source for that one, right? This amazing story is almost too good to be true. Cause blonde don't always mean white or pale skin, too. Melanesians, right? Melanesians, right? But it does fit into the proper locations. Caves and overall strangeness associated with the lost race of giants. The odd thing in Paxton's case is the fact that the hair discovered on the giant skull was blonde. I'd like to definitely see that. We're gonna have to follow up on that instead of red. Hayes, a herpetologist, what? A herpetologist? had heard legends about the ancient blonde giants from the local Sonora Indians and decided to investigate the tales further while searching for rare snakes in the high desert canyons. Although his startling discovery, Hayes said, about his startling discovery, Hayes said, every basket we found contained a body wrapped like a silkworm, all right, so like a mummy, right? There were 34, so 34 mummies, okay, of which 2 were women. 9 were mummified, like I just said, and the remainder were skeletons. When the bones of the mummies were laid out properly, the various bodies measured from 7 feet to 6 inches, guys. All right, in Sonora, listen, mummies that tall, this is what they're finding. In most cases, up to the largest skeleton, which was a full 8 feet tall, 8 footers. The greatest mystery of Hayes' find, and perhaps the key that one day may solve this riddle of the Mongoloid past, were the saffron-colored burial robes found on the giants. There may be a great historical tale behind the powder blue designs of latch hooks and pyramids that embellish the robes. Hayes thinks that the tiny series of white dots that recurred throughout the robes are symbols of the ancient Indian time cycle, and working on that theory points out that if this be true, the white dots add up to 25,000 years. He took up the burial robes to the chiefs of the Seri Indians on Tiburon Island off the Mexican west coast. They were as puzzled as Hayes. Paxton Hayes even brought his findings to the Seri Indians, who were related in some way to the ancient giants, and they didn't even know what they were looking at. More follow-ups were made into the Hayes discovery, and even a few photos were published of the giant skull and the robe. Paxton Hayes, explorer, studies the head of a giant mummy discovered by him in a deep cave hitherto unexplored regions of Sonora, Mexico. The mummified remains were of a race 7.5 feet tall and preserved in excellent condition. Corn found with the mummies has been given to scientists. All right, they even found corn, right? A year later, Hayes took his discoveries on the road with him and impressed folks all across America up until his arrival at the Smithsonian. Okay, there you go. There you go, the hijacks. See what happened? The July 22nd, 1937 edition of the Washington Post reported, with several dozen snakes, all alive, and the burial robe of a prehistoric giant, quite dead. They got this robe, right? Packed in their trailer. They stopped in Washington yesterday to promote interest in their unique fields of activity. Herpetologically speaking, their purpose in coming here from California was to present President Roosevelt with 15 smoky snakes, 10 California and Mexican rattlers, and an 8-foot baby Mexican boa constrictor, which was shedding. Marvin C. McIntyre received them at the White House, expressed gratitude, and suggested the reptile house at the zoo as perhaps the best place for the snakes. Dr. Ernest P. Walker, assistant director of the zoo, officially welcomed the snakes to their new home. That over the visitors then dropped in at the Smithsonian Institution with the prehistoric burial robe and a 4-legged stool, okay? Both of which they unearthed in a burial cave in northern Sonora, Mexico. That's why we never saw the robe. They hid that. Imagine seeing this giant robe. Wow, from ancient times, guys. I wonder why it was made like. Says the Californians explained that the cave, one of 18 they had discovered, contains well-preserved mummies of a race which averaged over 6.5 feet in height, up to 8 feet tall. The caves are scattered over an area of 450 square miles. Hayes, who has just returned from his 5th expedition to the caves, heard about their existence from the Yaqui Indians of Mexico. All right, that was the report from the Washington Post, right? 1937 says the annual report of the Board of Regents of the Smithsonian Institution confirms that Hayes met with Smithsonian officials and gave them the burial robe from a lost race of giants. Wow. So what happened? I bet you go ask them right now, they're going to deny all this, right? As usual, it became another thing associated with giants that ended up lost after the visit to Washington. Here we go. I told you, that's all they do is hide stuff. Hayes also claimed that he found more giant skeletons in New Mexico, although these giants were much different looking and considered by Hayes to be of Asian origins. None of them from America, right? However, unlike the Copper Canyon discoveries, Hayes chose not to provide evidence of his findings, perhaps bitter that the Smithsonian hadn't been returning his calls. So here we have a rediscovered fabled lost city, a giant mummified head, and a burial robe of a giant, all three with accompanying photographs published in the most prestigious newspapers of the time. Yet nearly 20 years after his initial discovery, Hayes still couldn't get a proper scientific investigation to validate his claims. More than 60 years later, Hayes, his findings, and his mysterious legacy have all but vanished without a trace. All right, we're going to have to definitely follow up on that, right? We're going to definitely are. Back in central Mexico, 8-foot giant Indian skeletons were still being unearthed and reported on by the New York Times in, for example, this article from 1925. And it says in the article, cave in Mexico gives up the bones of an ancient race. From Boston, May 3rd, Charles C. Clapp, who has recently returned from Mexico, where he has been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson mining interest, has called the attention to Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men each above 8 feet in height. 200 skeletons, guys, pay attention, right? 200 skeletons of men each above 8 feet tall, all of them taller than 8 feet. Pay attention. So they're consulting with Louis Agassiz, who said America's the true old world. Oh yeah. Continuing, says the cave was evidently a burial place of a race of giants who antedated the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of the skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches. That's almost 9 feet. The femur reached up to his thigh, and molars were big enough to crack a coconut. The head measured 18 inches from front to back. During the settling of Mexico, numerous reports of giant skeletons ranging from 7 to more than 13 feet in height can be found, okay? There's even the curious case of the subgenre species of giants that have 6 toes and fingers. Ancient hieroglyphics in Mexico even depict them. Chronicles 26 tells us about the ancient 6-fingered giants of the Holy Lands. All right, they found people like that here. So this is the Holy Lands. And there was again war at Gath, where was a man of great stature whose fingers and toes were 4 and 20, 6 on each hand, and 6 on each foot. And he also was born unto the giant. All right. Even the ancient giant Goliath was noted to have 6 fingers. But we'll talk more about these giants in a following chapter. To the ancient Mexicans, the belief in giants was a foregone conclusion. It was an unmistakable fabric of their origins, woven into their ancestry without the slightest bit of condescendence. The mythological history of Mesoamerica, along with the region's impressive pyramids and archaeological discoveries of large bones, both past and present, proves that ancient Mexico was once home to that mysterious race of lost giants. This giant kingdom, all right, this giant kingdom stretched from the jungles of Mexico to the warm waters of the Caribbean, where the infamous conquistador Amerigo Vespucci was about to discover an island full of them. All right, now we got some drop here coming, and that's on the next chapter, guys, about Amerigo Vespucci, what he saw in the Americas. We'll get that in the next chapter. All right, so we're done with this chapter 7 in this book. This was a really interesting reading. I hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna add more to the giant investigation we had going. As you guys see, so many reports. If you have been following my giant videos, since the first ones, then you guys gotta, by now you should see this was the kingdom of the giants, right? There was giants here in America, guys, all over the place, all over. These reports are real. These are primary sources, and the bones, they did find them. Too many reports from credited people. They just got hidden. They got buried. They were made in, they kept this a secret from us. They kept this away. They didn't want us to think about this type of history. It doesn't go with evolution. It doesn't fit their Darwinism out of ape stuff. You can't explain giants in the out of Africa stuff. You guys understand? This is deep. But I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. It's a great book. Shout out to, again, the author. Again, this was the book, Discovering Ancient America, Ancient America's Lost Giants by Shavian Hayes. All right. Support the author if you like the book. Get the physical copy. I have a PDF copy in my Patreon page if you're interested as well. But I do appreciate you guys coming, tuning in, listening and learning together with me. This is the first time I read this, review this chapter with myself or anybody, right? So we got some drop for the first time, all of us, all right? A lot of us. Many of you probably knew a lot of this stuff already, but we got it, all right? So I appreciate you guys tuning in all the way to the end. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to add this to the giants. You see all these reports. It's undoubted, right, that this is the true old world. These are biblical lands. There were giants in those days and after. Appreciate you guys very much. I'll give you your time back. All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the support. Shout out to all my moderators, everybody in the live chat. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. Shout out to my channel members, my longtime followers. Shout out to everybody who's shown love over the years. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.